Day one, yeah, future. So here's my first memory of my first day of college, late August 1993. I walk into Wimpy, which is the gymnasium near Allen Hall, where I'm a student, on the Urbana side of the University of Illinois. And there's a black game going on, a white game going on, and an Asian game going on in the 3 basketball courts. And I'm confused, you know? Basically, I'm like, why isn't everybody trying to play in the white game? That's my guy Brian Zell, who I've known since I was 8 years old, laughing at me. You're going to hear that throughout the talk. Because honestly, since I was 8 years old, I wanted to play in the white game. Right? The white game for everything, not just basketball, but for school and for birthday parties and for Friday night parties in high school and for after football game stuff. I wanted to play in the white game. Right? When I was a kid, I literally tried to scratch my skin from brown to white. I would tell my mom, I'd be like, you know, you can't put samosas in my lunch. I mean, first you name me Eboo. I mean, seriously, right? And now you're going to put these things? I mean, do you know what happens to me at school? Right? I tried to run with white kids. I tried to listen to white music. And this was all so subconscious. Because it's just what you did in Glen Ellen in the late 1980s and early 1990s. But you get to the University of Illinois in 1993, and you watch the black game and the Asian game and the white game, and you think to yourself, wait a second, they seem perfectly comfortable in their games. And each of them has their own kind of dynamic, their own free flow, their own give and go, their own pick and roll strategy. And I couldn't play basketball that day because it was just too much for me. Right? Like I had literally in front of me the metaphor come to life. Like I have for years and years and years tried to play in the white game. And now I'm in an environment where there are different games. And there's people who choose to play in those different games. And who am I going to be here? So the beautiful thing about a college campus was that there was a conversation around that day. The conversation at Allen Hall, Unit 1, where I was a student, the conversation at the Campus Honors Program, conversations here at the Friday Forum at the University of YMCA. I was here every Friday at the Friday Forum. And back then, in the early 1990s, the conversation around race, ethnicity, gender, increasingly sexuality diverse, it was robust, it was rich. And probably from 7 p.m. every night to 2 a.m. in the morning, 4 or 5 nights a week, we would talk race. We would talk identity, we would talk gender. I'd be like, so why do we have a black student union and an Allen Hall council in our dorm, right? Why is it that you can't walk 10 feet on this campus without running into somebody reading bell hooks or Cornell West? No. Why is it that when the football coach gives speeches at pep rallies, he emphasizes that he rules black and white athletes together? There was this rich, robust conversation on race, ethnicity, identity, gender, sexuality. I became new in that conversation. Right? I started to ask the question, well, what would it mean if I was proud of being named Eboo? What would it mean if I was proud of that samosa in my lunch in high school? What would it mean if I asked the question, what does it mean to be a second-generation Indian kid in late 20th century America? A whole different set of questions, a whole different paradigm than I had before. And it was largely because in the early 1990s, college campuses, including the University of Illinois, took the issue of race and ethnic identity very, very seriously. Here's my theory on that. You know what had happened about a year before I stepped on campus? Rodney King. And a combination of that vicious beating caught on video in the pre-iPhone camera and pre-YouTube days, and the results of the trial in Ventura County, where an almost entirely white jury acquitted 4 police officers, and the chaos that ensued as a result of that, showed America that in the early 1990s, race issues hadn't ended with the civil rights movement. that there was an awful lot of work to do. And to higher education's great credit, it recognized that it could play a significant role in advancing America, in creating a conversation around racial identity, equality, cooperation, harmony, etc. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that I come to college during an inflection point in the multicultural conversation. A bunch of other things were happening at that time. Ronald Takaki out of Berkeley had recently published A Different Mirror, which was kind of a multicultural history of the United States. Charles Murray had recently published A Bell Curve, which was a racist account of biological and intellectual differences between people of color and white folks. There was this kind of confluence of stuff, and what it led to effectively, at least for me personally, was a recognition that the American project has been made up of people from a variety of backgrounds, contributing who they are from their different racial, ethnic, gender, sexual orientation perspectives, and creating a nation called America. And that it serves my history, my identity, but also my nation if I ask questions about who I am and where I come from, and what that contribution might mean for my community and my country. So, like any good college student who was reading books that helped the scales fall from his eyes, I would get in my father's Oldsmobile, which he had given me when I was a second year on this campus, and I would drive north on I-57 to the suburbs of Chicago, of course with like 2 baskets full of dirty laundry and a bunch of empty Tupperware containers. And I would arrive at home, and my parents would dutifully do my laundry and cook me a bunch of hot Indian meals. Being Indian was cool in college. That's how different college was than high school. I'd come back and other people would eat the stuff that was my mom would cook at home. And I would take all of the wisdom that I had acquired in 9 months on a college campus, and I would blast my father with lectures on all of the things he hadn't taught me growing up. Willard Broom was getting a big kick out of that. He knew me back then. And my dad was mostly good-natured about this. He'd be like, yes, your high school English curriculum should have required you to read some Ralph Ellison, some Richard Wright, some Toni Morrison. Yes, Glen Ellen, at least in the late 1980s, early 1990s, was a pretty lily-white environment. Yes, the American project is made up of people from different backgrounds, and you are, in fact, not educated if you don't know some things about those backgrounds. Right? And every once in a while, I kind of push a little bit, again, 18 years old on a college campus, if you're not pushing, it means you're not paying attention. I used the word bourgeois, and that was the line for my dad. You use the word bourgeois one more time in my house, you can find some other bourgeois dad to pay your bourgeois college tuition. So that's what thesaurus came in handy. Finding synonyms for bourgeois. My dad says to me at one point, this is, I usually choose like a Bears game or something, some very bourgeois activity to like give my dad a piece of my mind what I'm reading recently in Sociology 331 or whatever. And my dad says to me at one point, you think you're pretty smart, right? Black power, multicultural consciousness, you think that I've never thought about these things. I was one of the only immigrant Indian Muslim students at the University of Notre Dame in the mid-1970s, and as wonderful as those priests were, it was in fact the land of gray snow and white Catholics. I was one of the first people to attain a senior position in corporate advertising in the Midwest. I was one of the first people of color to start a business in the suburb of Lisle. I know a little bit about being a minority, so don't think that everything you're saying is brand new to the world. He says something else. You like to talk about identity all the time. You like to talk about diversity all the time. But you never seem to talk about the dimension of identity or diversity that's driving the world. So the next time you want to come up north with your baskets of dirty laundry and your empty Tupperware containers and have your parents listen to you blast them and do all this work for you, you just tell me how you're going to solve the problem of religious conflict in the world. And I remember rolling my eyes and collecting my clean folded clothes and my full Tupperware containers and driving back down south on I-57 thinking to myself just how 19th century my father was.